The Vel'kari survey ship Harmonious Descent had been drifting through the dead sector for 3 standard cycles when Chief Xenoarchaeologist Threnel made the discovery that would reshape their understanding of the galaxy. Commander Shiva, Threnel's voice crackled across the comm with an urgency that made her secondary hearts flutter. You need to see this immediately. Commander Shiva of the Vel'kari exploratory fleet rose from her meditation pool, her iridescent scales still dripping. The dead sector earned its name honestly. 7 civilizations had risen and fallen in this region over the past 50 million years, each one extinguishing itself in nuclear fire, biological warfare, or dimensional collapse. It was a graveyard of ambition, a testament to the self-destructive tendencies that seemed to plague spacefaring species. The Vel'kari had catalogued the ruins of them all. There was nothing new to find here, or so she had thought. When she entered the scanning bay, Threnel was practically vibrating with excitement, his sensory tendrils waving in complex patterns that indicated profound agitation. On the holographic display before him floated a small, unremarkable planetoid, or what had once been a planet before some cataclysm had shattered it into fragments. It's not on any of the charts, Threnel said, manipulating the display to zoom in on one particular asteroid. It shouldn't exist. According to our dating analysis, this debris field is only 12,000 standard years old, far too recent for this sector. Shiva felt her own tendrils tighten. Another extinction event, yes, but Threnel highlighted a structure embedded in the asteroid's surface, but they left something behind, something deliberate, something that's still broadcasting. Part 2, the vault. The landing party consisted of Commander Shiva, Threnel, Junior Technician Kress, and Security Officer Varn. They materialized on the asteroid's surface in a shower of purple light, their environmental suits humming softly in the vacuum. The structure before them defied immediate classification. It was geometric yet organic, clearly artificial yet somehow alive in its aesthetic. Symbols covered every surface, writing systems, mathematical equations, visual representations that seemed to shift and flow even though they were carved in stone. Radiation levels are negligible, Kress reported, her 4 eyes blinking in sequence. Whatever destroyed their world, this vault was shielded from it. Or built after, Varn rumbled, his massive frame dwarfing the others. The Kron people were warriors by nature, but Varn had developed a deep appreciation for archaeology, a monument to the dead. The entrance was clearly marked, a doorway that responded to their presence by sliding open with remarkable smoothness for something 12 millennia old. Internal lighting activated automatically, revealing a corridor that descended deep into the asteroid's heart. Threnel ran his scanner along the walls. The power source is. I don't understand. It's not fusion, not antimatter, not zero-point energy. It's something else entirely, and it's barely depleted after 12,000 years. They walked in reverent silence, following the corridor as it spiraled downward. The walls were covered in images, beings that walked upright on 2 legs, with bilateral symmetry and forward-facing eyes. They had no scales, no tendrils, no natural armor. Fragile-looking things with smooth skin in varying shades of brown, pink, and tan. Humans, Shiva whispered, translating the symbol that appeared repeatedly. They called themselves humans. The corridor opened into a vast chamber that stole the breath from all of them. It was a cathedral of memory, a temple to existence itself. Countless thousands of crystalline data cores floated in suspension fields, each one pulsing with a soft, warm light. In the center of the chamber stood a statue, a human figure with arms outstretched, hands open as if offering everything. At the statue's base, a holographic interface flickered to life. To their astonishment, it spoke in perfect Vel'kari. Greetings, travelers, welcome to the Archive of Echoes. We were humanity. If you are seeing this, then we are gone and our world is dust. We knew this day would come. We saw it approaching for decades and could not stop it. Our nature damned us as it has damned so many before us. But we leave you this, everything we were, everything we created, everything we dreamed, not as a warning, not as a cautionary tale, but as a gift, as proof that we existed, that we mattered, that we loved. The hologram shifted, and suddenly they were looking at a human face, an elderly female with white hair and eyes that held both profound sadness and fierce determination. My name was Dr. Alina Vasquez, and I was the director of the archive project. When our governments finally admitted that the war could not be stopped, that the weapons were too terrible and the hatreds too deep, a group of us made a choice. We could spend our last days in despair, or we could spend them in celebration of what we had been. We chose celebration. The hologram gestured and the data cores began to glow brighter. We gathered everything. Every book, every song, every film, every painting, every photograph, every mathematical proof, every scientific discovery, every recipe, every joke, every love letter, every child's drawing. We sent teams to every museum, every library, every server, every attic and basement. We interviewed everyone who would speak to us. We recorded the memories of the old and the dreams of the young. We captured the sound of rain on leaves, the sight of sunset over the ocean, the feel of a child's hand in yours. Dr. Vasquez's image smiled, and it was heartbreaking in its warmth. We had 2 years while the world burned around us. But we did it, 70 billion individual files, the accumulated creativity, knowledge, and memory of 15,000 years of human civilization. And we built this vault to protect it, powered it with something that would outlast our atoms themselves, and launched it into space with a prayer that someone would find it, that someone would know we existed. She paused, and her eyes glistened with moisture. We were not perfect. We were tribal and violent, prone to fear and hatred. We destroyed our own cradle world in our arrogance, but we were also capable of breathtaking beauty. We could be kind, we could be brave, we could love so deeply it hurt. We could dream of impossible things and then make them real. We could stand beneath the stars and feel wonder. We were human in all its terrible and magnificent meaning. Please, she whispered, remember us. Not as the fools who destroyed themselves, but as the beings who sang in the darkness, who painted light, who loved despite knowing we would lose everything, who reached for the stars even as we fell. The hologram faded, and a simple menu appeared in every major language the Vel'kari had ever encountered, as well as hundreds they hadn't. Threnel stepped forward with trembling hands and selected the first option, music, #Part 3, the song of a dead world. What emerged from the speakers was beyond anything the Vel'kari had ever experienced. It began with a single voice, human and female, singing without accompaniment. The words were translated in real time, but the emotion needed no translation. It was a lullaby, ancient beyond reckoning, about stars and sleep and safety. Threnel felt his own mother's song in it, though the melody was alien. Then instruments joined, sounds created by human hands from wood and metal and gut, strings that wept, percussion that mimicked heartbeats, wind instruments that breathed. The archive had organized the music chronologically. They listened to tribal drums that spoke of hunting and harvest, sacred chants that reached for the divine, folk songs that told stories of love and loss, heroes and villains, joy and sorrow. Then came an explosion of complexity. Symphonies that built cathedrals of sound, each instrument a voice in a conversation too beautiful for words. The Vel'kari stood transfixed as a piece called Symphony No. 9 by a human named Beethoven washed over them. The composer had been deaf when he wrote it, the archive helpfully provided context, and yet he had created something that made Shiva's souls ache with its beauty. How, she whispered, how could they make this? They listened to jazz, improvisation made perfect, chaos refined to art. They heard blues that carried the weight of oppression and the defiance of the unbroken spirit. They experienced rock music that was primal rebellion and pop music that was pure joy distilled. Cress, normally the most logical and unemotional of their crew, was openly weeping as she listened to something called Clair de Lune. It's describing moonlight, she said in wonder. They made moonlight into sound. They spent hours in that section alone, barely scratching the surface. Opera and gospel, electronic and folk, hip-hop and heavy metal, classical Indian ragas and aboriginal songlines. Every culture, every era, every emotion the human heart had ever felt, expressed in sound. But it was a song near the end of the archive that broke them all. It was titled The Last Song, and it had been composed during the final days. A children's choir, the translation specified their ages, between 6 and 12 standard years, singing about hope, about the future they would never see, about whoever might find this archive. We are the children who danced beneath Saul, we are the dreamers who won't see tomorrow, but if you hear this song across the void, then love was stronger than the sorrow. We leave you our music, our stories, our art, *. We leave you the best of the human heart, remember us kindly, remember us true. We sang for ourselves, but we sang for you. Security Officer Varn, hardened warrior of 1,000 battles, collapsed to his knees and sobbed. His people had a saying, a warrior's tears are sacred, for they are shed for what is truly lost. He had never understood it until that moment. #Part 4, the weight of stories they explored deeper. The literature section contained every story humanity had ever written. Epics chiseled in stone, scrolls that had crumbled to dust but lived on in digital immortality, manuscripts illuminated with gold leaf, mass-market paperbacks with dog-eared pages and coffee stains. Threnell selected a work at random, 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. He read about a family in a place called Macondo, about love and madness and time itself, about the weight of memory and the inevitability of forgetting. The prose was lush and dreamlike, painting pictures with words in ways that Vel'kari literature had never attempted. Shiva found herself drawn to poetry. Humans, it seemed, had compressed their most profound truths into the smallest packages. A poem by someone named Rumi, dead for 800 years before the archive was built, spoke of love as a force that transcended individual existence. Another, by Maya Angelou, was a defiant roar against oppression that made Shiva stand taller. There were children's books, simple stories about bears and rabbits, about the power of kindness and the importance of trying. Cress found herself reading one called The Velveteen Rabbit and understanding something profound about the human concept of becoming real through being loved. The science fiction section was almost painful, humans dreaming of the stars they would never reach. Stories of first contact written with hope and optimism by beings who would die alone, tales of utopias they would never build and dystopias they had in the end created. But there was also philosophy, humans asking the questions that all sapient beings ask: what is truth? What is justice? How should we live? What do we owe to each other? Thinkers from every culture wrestling with existence itself. Varn discovered military history and found himself respecting these fragile beings more with every account. They had fought wars of stunning brutality, yes, but also produced individuals of impossible courage. The archive contained the story of a soldier named Desmond Doss who refused to carry a weapon but saved 75 men under fire. Of a woman named Sophie Skahl who stood against tyranny, knowing it would cost her life. Of countless unknown people who chose compassion when cruelty would have been easier. They knew, Varn said quietly. They knew what they were, they wrote it down, painted it, sang about it. They saw their own capacity for evil and still chose to celebrate their capacity for good. That is true courage. Part 5, Visual Symphonies. The art gallery section of the archive could have occupied them for years. Cave paintings 40,000 years old, handprints on stone that said, I was here, I existed, I mattered. Sculptures from every culture, humans had taken inert matter and made it breathe, dance, weep. The statue of David, the terracotta warriors, the Olmec heads, the Benin bronzes, the Moai of Easter Island, paintings that captured light itself. Monet's water lilies, Turner's storms, Van Gogh's starry nights. The Vel'kari understood color theory, but humans had made it sing. They had bent light to their will and created windows into their souls. Threnell stood before a digital reproduction of the Sistine Chapel ceiling and felt his worldview crack. A single human, Michelangelo, had spent 4 years on his back painting this, painting humans reaching for the divine reaching back. The most famous panel showed God's hand and Adam's hand, fingertips nearly touching, that infinitesimal gap that contained all of human yearning. They painted their own creation, Threnell whispered. They imagined the divine in their own image and then strove to be worthy of it, the hubris, the hope, the tragedy. There was photography, humanity freezing moments in time, a sailor kissing a nurse as a war ended. A man standing before tanks in defiance of tyranny, a child's eyes reflecting a world of suffering and resilience. The first photograph of Earth from space, a fragile blue marble in an ocean of black, the only home they'd ever known. The film section was perhaps most revelatory. Here was humanity in motion, acting out their stories. Cress watched a film called The Shawshank Redemption and understood something about hope as a choice, as an act of rebellion against despair. Shiva experienced Spirited Away and saw imagination made visible, the fantastic rendered real. They watched documentaries about the natural world, David Attenborough's voice describing the wonders of Earth with such love and reverence that they mourned a planet they'd never seen. They watched humans explore their own world, from the deepest ocean trenches to the highest mountains, driven by an insatiable curiosity. And they watched the films made in the final years, not propaganda or denial, but honest reckonings with what was coming. A film called Testament showed ordinary people living their last days with dignity. Another, Children of Men, imagined a world without future generations and the desperate hope that kept humanity human even in darkness. Hash Part 6. The mundane made sacred, but it was the personal archives that truly broke them. The archive project had collected the everyday. Home videos of birthday parties and graduations, photographs of pets and gardens, recipe cards stained with sauce and worn with use, journals and diaries, the private thoughts of billions. Kress spent an entire day reading the diary of a teenage girl from the 21st century. Not because it contained great insights, but because it was so perfectly, achingly normal. Crushes on boys who didn't notice her, arguments with her parents, anxieties about exams, dreams of becoming a marine biologist. The last entry was dated 2 weeks before the war began. Today I saw a dolphin at the beach. It looked right at me and I swear it smiled. I think everything's going to be okay. Everything was not okay. The girl's name was added to the memorial list. Age 17, Varn discovered a collection of letters between soldiers and their families across various wars. The words changed with each conflict, the technology of death advanced, but the sentiments remained constant. I miss you, I'm afraid, I'm trying to be brave, tell the children I love them. I dream of coming home. One collection particularly moved him. Letters from a war called World War I, men writing from trenches that were their graves in waiting, describing horror with dark humor and aching vulnerability. A soldier named Wilfred Owen had written poetry between battles, describing war's futility and the pity of it all. He died 1 week before the armistice. He was 25. Shiva found herself in the oral history section, listening to interviews recorded in the archive project's final months. An elderly woman describing the taste of her grandmother's bread. A jazz musician explaining how improvisation was like having a conversation where everyone spoke at once in perfect harmony. A father describing the moment his daughter was born and how it changed everything he thought he knew about love. We wanted you to know the small things, one interviewee said directly to the camera, tears streaming down his face. Because the small things are what make a life, not our monuments or our great achievements, but the cup of coffee shared with a friend. The weight of a child asleep on your shoulder, the first bite of a perfectly ripe peach, the sound of rain, the smell of old books, the feeling of grass between your toes, these things made us human. These things made us happy. Please remember that we were happy. Hash Part 7, the children's voices, the section labeled Children's Contributions, nearly destroyed them all. The archive project had gone to schools and asked children to submit anything they wanted to preserve. The results were heartbreaking in their innocence. Drawings in crayon and marker. Stick figures holding hands beneath a smiling sun. Houses with smoke curling from chimneys. Cats and dogs and dragons and princesses. One child had drawn the entire solar system with Jupiter as big as the page and Earth as a tiny blue dot, labeled home. There were stories dictated to teachers and parents, tales of adventure and magic with the boundless logic of young minds. The Dinosaur Who Liked Tea by Emma, age 6. My Dog Is Actually a Robot by Marcus, age 8. The Day I Met a Fairy by Yuki, age 7. Video messages where children spoke to the unknown future. A boy named Carlos, maybe 10 years old, held up his favorite book, something called Where the Wild Things Are, and said, "This is my favorite story because Max goes on an adventure but then comes home. I hope you have adventures too, but I hope you get to come home." A girl named Amara, no older than 8, sang a song she'd made up. Stars are friends who live far away. Maybe you're my friend someday. I'm from Earth. Where are you from? I wish that we could all be one. There were thousands of messages, tens of thousands, children who would never grow up, leaving pieces of their souls for someone to find. The last video in the collection was different. It showed a massive gathering. The archive explained it was at a place called the United Nations. Thousands of children from every nation, every culture, every background. The planet was dying around them and they knew it. The adults had failed them and they knew that too, but they sang anyway. They sang a song written for this moment in 100 languages that blended into harmony. The translation was simple. We forgive you for the world you leave. We forgive you though our hearts will grieve. We were here, we laughed, we learned, we played, asterisk. We were loved in the little time we stayed. Remember us not with tears and shame. Remember we lived. Remember our names. Tell the stars that we dreamed of tomorrow. Turn our song into something more than sorrow. When it ended, the children were asked if they had any message for whoever found the archive. A small boy, no more than 6, with dark skin and bright eyes, stepped forward. "Don't be sad," he said solemnly. "We got to be alive. We got to see the sun and eat ice cream and hug our moms and dads. We got to exist. That's pretty cool, right?" He smiled, gap-toothed and genuine. We were here, we happened, nothing can make us unhappen, so it's okay. The video ended. The landing party sat in absolute silence. Cress spoke first, her voice barely audible. I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure they are remembered, every single one of them. We all will, Shiva said softly. We must. Part 8, The Science of Dreamers. After several days in the archive, and several more spent processing what they'd experienced, the landing party explored the scientific and mathematical sections. Here, they expected to find valuable but emotionally neutral material. They were wrong. Humans had pursued knowledge with a passion that bordered on obsession. The archive contained not just their discoveries but their failures, their false starts, their debates and controversies. They documented not just what they learned but how they learned it, preserving the journey as much as the destination. Threnell found himself fascinated by the history of astronomy. Humans had started by staring at lights in the sky with naked eyes, creating myths to explain what they saw. Then they built better tools, telescopes, satellites, space probes. They discovered that Earth circled the sun, not the reverse. That the sun was one of billions of stars, that their galaxy was one of billions of galaxies. Each discovery made them smaller and more insignificant, and yet they kept looking. He found a recording of a scientist named Carl Sagan, explaining that humans were a way for the cosmos to know itself, that their atoms were forged in the hearts of dying stars, that they were, literally, stardust contemplating stardust. They knew they were small, Threnell said in wonder, and they loved the universe anyway. They knew they were brief, and they reached for eternity. The mathematics section revealed minds of stunning beauty. Humans had discovered underlying patterns in reality, the Fibonacci sequence in seashells and galaxies, the golden ratio in faces and flowers, pi in circles and waves. They'd developed languages of pure logic to describe the indescribable. Cress found the notes of a mathematician named Ramanujan, who claimed his equations came to him in dreams from a goddess. Whether divine inspiration or subconscious genius, his work had pushed human understanding of number theory forward by centuries. He died at 32, 1,000 proofs still in his mind. The medical archives were filled with triumph and tragedy. Humans had battled invisible enemies, bacteria, viruses, cancer, genetic disorders. They developed vaccines, antibiotics, surgical techniques. They transplanted organs, replaced failing hearts, cured diseases that had killed billions. But what moved Varn was the philosophy behind it. He found the oath attributed to Hippocrates, first, do no harm. He read about doctors who'd worked through plagues and wars, who'd treated enemy and friend alike, who'd given their lives trying to save others. There was a recording from the archive's final days, a hospital where doctors and nurses continued working even as the bombs fell. One doctor, asked why she stayed, said simply, because people are still hurting, because I can help, because this is who I choose to be in the darkness. The engineering section showed humans reshaping their world. They'd built wonders, bridges that defied gravity, towers that scraped the sky, tunnels that connected continents. They'd split the atom and bent light and touched the face of the moon. But Shiva was most moved by the simple inventions, the wheel. The printing press, the sewing needle, the stirrup, small things that had changed everything, created by forgotten minds trying to make life a little easier, a little better. There was a subset labeled failed experiments, and it was enormous. Thousands of attempts that hadn't worked, documented carefully so others wouldn't repeat the same mistakes. It was an act of generosity across time. We tried this and it failed, so you don't have to. They learned by breaking things, Shiva observed. They weren't afraid to fail because failure taught them truth. How brave, how terribly brave. Part 9, The Faiths of a Searching Species. The section on religion and spirituality was the most delicate, but also the most revealing. Humans had developed thousands of belief systems, each trying to answer the fundamental questions. Why are we here? What happens when we die? What is sacred? How should we live? The archive presented them all without judgment. Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, and thousands more. Indigenous spiritualities that saw the divine in nature, philosophies that sought meaning without gods, atheistic frameworks that found purpose in the material world. What struck the Vel'kari was the sincerity. These weren't just abstract philosophies but lived experiences. The archive contained recordings of prayer in every tradition, the Muslim call to prayer echoing across desert cities, Buddhist monks chanting in mountain monasteries, gospel choirs raising their voices in joy, rabbis debating scripture with passionate intensity. Threnel watched a video of a Hindu festival called Kumbh Mela, where millions gathered to bathe in sacred rivers. The sheer scale of devotion was overwhelming. These people had traveled vast distances, enduring hardship, driven by faith in something beyond themselves. They needed it, Cress said softly. The universe was so big and uncaring, and they were so small and mortal. They needed to believe in something larger. But there was also conflict. The archive didn't shy away from religious violence, from crusades and jihads, from persecution and intolerance. Humans had killed each other over different names for God, different paths to the divine. Yet even in the final days, the archive showed humans of different faiths coming together. There was footage of a mosque sheltering Christians, a synagogue hiding Muslims, Hindus and Buddhists praying side by side. In the end, when everything else burned away, many chose compassion over doctrine. The archive included a section on atheistic and humanistic philosophy, humans who found meaning without the supernatural, who believed this life was enough, who created their own purpose in an indifferent universe. Varn found a quote from a philosopher named Albert Camus: "One must imagine Sisyphus happy." The idea that even futile struggle could be given meaning by choice resonated deeply with the old warrior. There were also the spiritual experiences that transcended religion, accounts of meditation, psychedelic journeys, moments of transcendent connection with nature or art or other beings. Humans describing feelings of oneness, of ego dissolution, of touching something infinite and eternal. They were searching, Shiva concluded. All of them in their different ways, searching for the same thing: connection, meaning, hope. They never found final answers, but they never stopped searching. Part 10, the games and joy. After so much weight, they needed lightness. They found it in the recreation section. Humans had played. Oh, how they had played. Sports that tested physical prowess, running, jumping, throwing, swimming. Team sports that required coordination and strategy. The archive contained footage of what they called the Olympics, humans pushing their bodies to absolute limits for no reason except to see what was possible. Varn watched a recording of a marathon, humans running for hours through pain and exhaustion. One runner collapsed meters from the finish line, and another stopped to help them across. Both were disqualified, but the crowd erupted in cheers. "This is not logical," Varn said, but his eyes were wet. "This is beautiful." Board games and card games that tested minds, chess, go, poker, bridge. Humans had developed infinitely deep games from simple rules, creating worlds of strategy and bluff and calculation. Video games were a revelation: interactive stories, digital playgrounds, competitive arenas. Cress found herself playing a game called Journey, where a small robed figure traveled through a desert toward a distant mountain. It required no violence, no competition. It was just beautiful. She completed it in one sitting and sat staring at the screen as the credits rolled, listing the anonymous players who had briefly journeyed alongside her character. "I played with ghosts," she whispered. "Humans who are dust now, but in this space they traveled with me." There were also simple pleasures, recipes for meals that would never be tasted again: pasta carbonara, pad thai, jollof rice, barbecue brisket. Humans describing flavors with the passion others reserved for art or music. Gardening guides showing how to nurture life from seeds. Knitting patterns passed down through generations. Instructions for building model ships, folding origami, solving Rubik's cubes. They found joy in small things, Threnel observed. They didn't need grand purposes every moment. They could be happy making a flower grow or mastering a puzzle. They could find meaning in the mundane. The humor section was perhaps most alien and most human. Jokes that spanned cultures and centuries, from ancient Greek playwrights to modern stand-up comedians. Satire that skewered power. Wordplay that delighted in language itself. Slapstick that celebrated the absurdity of physical existence. They watched a comedian named Robin Williams, manic and brilliant, finding laughter in everything. They read the sardonic wit of Oscar Wilde, who made beauty out of cynicism. They experienced Monty Python's surreal absurdism, where logic itself became the joke. They laughed at death, Varn said. They knew it was coming and they made jokes. What courage, what defiance. Part 11, the love letters. In a subsection labeled Personal Correspondence, they found the most intimate window into human hearts, love letters spanning millennia. From ancient Rome to the digital age, humans writing to those they loved with desperate honesty. A soldier in World War II to his wife: "I carry your photograph next to my heart. If I die, let it be the last thing I see." A teenager in the 21st century to her girlfriend: "You make me brave enough to be myself." A poet in the 19th century to her beloved, I love you beyond reason, beyond wisdom, beyond hope itself. Parents to children, you are my heart walking outside my body. Children to parents, thank you for teaching me that the world can be kind. Friends to friends, you saw me when I was invisible. There were also goodbye letters, so many goodbye letters, written in the archive's final days by people who knew the end was coming. A mother to her daughter already gone, I will find you in whatever comes next, I promise. A father to his son who would die before reading it, you made every moment worthwhile. I regret nothing except that we didn't have more time. Partners who'd spent lifetimes together, thank you for choosing me, thank you for staying, thank you for being my home. One letter unsigned, addressed to whoever finds this. I loved someone once who made me believe in magic. They died years before the end, and I've carried their memory like a candle in darkness. I want you to know that love is real, that it's worth the pain of losing it, that I would do it all again, every heartbreak, every loss, for one more day with them. Don't be afraid to love, it's the only thing that matters. Cress read that letter aloud, and when she finished, they all stood in silence. This is what they were, Shiva finally said, this capacity for connection, for devotion that transcended self-preservation. They could love so deeply they would die for it. They did die for it over and over throughout their history, and they never stopped believing it was worth it. Part 12, the final message. They had been in the archive for 2 standard weeks when they found the final recording, hidden deep in the system. It was labeled, for those who made it this far. Dr. Elena Vasquez appeared again, but this was different. She was alone in a small room and she looked exhausted, but her eyes burned with fierce determination. If you're seeing this, you've explored the archive. You've seen what we were, our triumphs and our failures, our beauty and our ugliness. You've heard our songs and read our stories. You've met us as we wanted to be remembered. Now I need to tell you the truth. We knew what we were doing was destroying our world. We knew for 100 years. We had the science, the data, the evidence. We could have stopped. We could have changed. But we didn't. We were too divided, too proud, too short-sighted. We saw the cliff approaching and we accelerated toward it anyway, each nation, each corporation, each individual certain that someone else would pay the price for our choices. We were not noble victims of fate. We were not tragic heroes undone by forces beyond our control. We killed ourselves. Slowly, then quickly, we killed ourselves. So why preserve this? Why spend our final days celebrating a species that failed so completely? Because failure is not the end of the story. Because even in our darkest moments there was light, because some of us, enough of us, chose to be better than our worst impulses. We were flawed, yes, fatally flawed, but we were also capable of transcendent beauty. I think, and here her voice broke, I think that's the real test of a species. Not whether you're perfect, but whether you can create something beautiful even in imperfection. Whether you can love even knowing you'll lose everything. Whether you can hope even when hope is irrational. We failed the first test, the test of survival, but we passed the second, the test of meaning. We made art that will outlast our atoms. We loved in ways that echo into eternity. We existed and our existence mattered. So I have a request for you, whoever you are. Don't remember us as a cautionary tale. We were that, yes, but we were more. Don't pity us. We had love, we had beauty, we had moments of transcendent joy. Don't judge us too harshly. Yes, we failed, but you might fail too. All species might. Instead, take what you can use. Learn from our mistakes, yes, but also learn from our triumphs. Listen to our music and let it move you. Read our stories and let them challenge you.